a continuation of the encounter between the wise men of Athens and the Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, which Rav Nosson beautifully develops the deeper meaning behind this discourse. It's found in the back of volume 4 of the Breslov Research Institute version of the Likutei Moharan. The very back, you'll find it there. So there are, in the discussions between them, the arguments between them, Rav Nosson offers a deep insight. We're now holding on the argument found on page 18, where the wise men of Athens asked the following. We have a millstone that has broken into pieces. The wise men of Athens said to Rabbi Yoshua, would you please sew it for us? Sew the millstone for us. Taking one of the pieces of the broken millstone, he threw it to them and said, spin some thread from this broken stone for me, the way the woman used threads of a garment to sew it together from the garment itself. Then I'll sew the millstone for you. Impossible, they insisted. It's just not possible to spin thread from stone. Then is it possible to sew a millstone? He asked them. So Rav Nosson here explains something phenomenal, something amazing, and it is a big encouragement to show that there's always hope. He explains, Rav Nosson, that according to the Kabbalah, the idea of a millstone, which basically has two components, the upper stone and the lower one, and you have the inside components joining them together, but the main two pieces is the upper millstone and the lower stone. The Arizal in the Kabbalah and also the Zohar, they bring this comparison of a millstone which produces to man and woman. That the union between man and woman is the pieces of the millstone being together. This is brought down in the Kabbalah, etc. You can look further there. So Rav Nosson explains based on this what the wise men of Athens were really asking. They were asking like this: somebody who has blemished his covenant, his Brit, sexual impurity, sexual blemish in all the ramifications that exist according to the Torah, what is considered a blemishing of sexual purity. Someone who has blemished their covenant, their sexual purity, they were asked, how can he fix it? That's the idea of a millstone that's broken. In other words, the proper bond and union in holiness between husband and wife, man and woman, was broken. How to fix it? So Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania threw a broken stone and he said, from this broken stone, make for me a thread and I'll sew it back together. Rav Nosson explains something phenomenal. He says the rectification of someone who has had a past of blemished sexual purity is through the act itself. In other words, a person who caused the spilling of the seed in vain by all types of forbidden relationships or forbidden sexual activity, God forbid, and as a result caused of vain emissions of seed, for example, or blemished emissions of seed, the way to rectify it now is to bring into the world more Jewish children. Through the act itself, that is the rectification of a blemished covenant. And they, the wise men of Athens, couldn't believe it, which is why they asked, is it possible to make a thread from a stone? And then he asked them, and is it possible to sew back a millstone? You're asking me something which is impossible, seemingly. In other words, he answered that this act, which seems to be very mundane, very unholy, how holy people can have relationships, and the truth is it's part of the Torah, part of Judaism is procreation. Tzaddikim are not people who are nomads and living in the mountain and they produce children from hocus pocus. Tzaddikim are people who had wives, they had children, they were involved in the procreation activity and had to descend into this area, which some people consider to be tainted, unholy, improper. The truth is no, specifically this act is the holiest of acts. This is the union which brings forth another Jewish soul into the world. And if you, the wise men of Athens, cannot believe that there's holiness in this, So then there's nothing to fix. What are you complaining about and asking? Is it, how can a person who's blemished his covenant fix it, if now you don't believe that in this act itself it is holy? It's a holy act of being union and being together. It's part of the Torah, even though it seems very hard to picture how, because it's so physical. It involves the lusts and the body's heat, God forbid. How could that be holy? So he's answered them saying, so if you don't believe in this in the first place, there's no room for your question in the first place. So this, Rav Nosson explains, is the greatest tshuva for people who've had a bad past of sexual immorality. The rectification, the main rectification, is yes, to get married, to bring Jewish children into the world. There was once a story in the time of 1930s in communist Russia by the KGB. There was a Jewish informer. He was very bad. He got many Jews sent to Siberia, many Jews killed by Stalin and the KGB, and he at a time was being pursued. In other words, afterwards the KGB turned against this Jew also, and he fled from Moscow, where he was, very far, and arrived in the village of Uman in the Ukraine, and he was known as being an informer. And even though he was an informer, which is a very terrible blemish, they say about an informer that he has no portion in the world to come, and according to some legal opinions and circumstances, it's even permissible today to kill such an informer because he poses a threat to the Jewish community at large. So because of that, he was known as an informer. The synagogues refused to accept him to come into Davin because he reached a point where he wanted to say Kaddish for his father. An informer, as far as he was, he had some trace of Judaism that he wanted to say Kaddish for his father. So all the synagogues didn't let him in. They forbid him to come in city Uman, except for the Breslov Klois in Uman, they let him in. And they knew there was an informer, but they said, shh, let him, if he's coming on his own, let him come. Anyways, there's no more informing because he's being pursued himself. So he came the first day, they let him stay. He said Kaddish. The second day, third day, he kept on coming and he felt comfortable. They didn't push him away. And eventually they approached him, you want to put on tefillin and this and that, until he really began to repent. So he reached a point where he began to feel very, very bad about what he did, of all the Jewish souls that he killed. So he approached then one of the outstanding Breslovers of that time, Rav Levi Yitzchak Bender, and he asked him, how can I fix the damage that I did? I killed hundreds of people. I caused hundreds, maybe thousands of Jews to be killed. How can I fix that? So Rav Levi Yitzchak Bender said, for the souls that you caused to leave, you can fix it by building a mikveh. Because the KGB, the government, made it illegal to have any kosher mikveh for women to immerse to go to. They were closing off one mikveh after the next until there were no mikvehs available in Uman and other communities throughout the Ukraine, which meant a seizing of Jewish continuity, because you can't be together and have union if there's no kosher mikveh, right? It became almost impossible. So he said, build a mikveh. Do the strength and build an illegal mikveh, and in the merit of the woman who will go to the mikveh and bring in Jewish children to the world, this will be rectification. And this man, he was strong and he was determined. He built an deep underground mikveh in his barn. He had a stable that he bought in Uman, and hidden in the stable, underground a few floors, he tapped into a water source from underground and was able to build a mikveh underground. And by that, women began to immerse, and this was his rectification. This is the idea of this being the main rectification for destruction of Jewish souls, whether it's through sexual defamation or even murder in this case.